In many situations, assigning overtime is the only way to meet tight delivery dates. This chapter explains how to create, test, and manage overtime requests. To schedule overtime, go to the Define menu, select Calendar, and click the Overtime tab. Or, click the Overtime Speedbar button, which brings up the Calendar dialog box and automatically switches to the Overtime tab. To create a new request, click New. Each request needs a descriptive name so it can be easily recognized in a list of overtime requests. Next, determine the scope of the overtime request, and by that we mean which employees need to work overtime. The broadest scope is Calendar Group. Every employee that participates in the calendar group will be assigned overtime. Selecting Department limits overtime to the employees whose primary department is selected from the department list. Selecting Employee limits overtime to just the selected employees, regardless of what calendar group and department they are assigned to. Enter the number of daily overtime hours you want to add. Note: the number you enter is added to the regular hours employees normally work in a day. Select the date range that overtime needs to be run. Last, determine the exact days within the date range that need overtime. Please refer to Chapter 12 of the Scheduler User's Guide for more information on defining overtime requests. Underneath the overtime request grid, you'll find the actual list of employees that are scheduled to work overtime for the currently selected overtime request. You can view the list by ascending employee or overtime date. Hours holds the requested overtime hours. Daily OT total holds the total overtime for that day. Most of the time, the two values will match. However, if you have multiple overtime requests that target the same person for the same day, daily OT total will be higher than hours. This can indicate a problem and is something you need to keep an eye on. As you experiment with running the scheduler with different overtime requests, you may want to try different combinations of overtime. Since the scheduler incorporates all active overtime requests, you need to deactivate overtime requests you want to bypass by clicking their Ignore checkbox, until such time as you decide to delete them altogether. Notice that the list of employees tied to the overtime request still show 8 hours of requested overtime. However, their daily OT total has 0 hours. The scheduler is driven by daily OT total and thus will not include ignored overtime requests when scheduling. The scheduler produces an overtime schedule report so you can communicate scheduled overtime to department heads and employees. Go to the Reports menu and select Overtime. This displays the Overtime Schedule Report dialog box. Filter and sort the report as needed and click OK.